The sound of tearing metal filled the sky. The small human shuttle, Talon 3, spun out of control as smoke poured from its side. Sparks danced inside the cockpit while flames licked the outer hull. The planet below, green and thick with trees, rushed up fast. Inside, Tomel, a quiet supply worker, gripped the harness across his chest. He had never flown in combat. He had never trained for landings like this. His job was just to manage cargo, count food packs, and keep engines stocked with coolant. But now, all he could do was hold on. Warning, the computer said calmly. Impact in 5 seconds. Tomel closed his eyes. The crash was loud, hard, and sharp. When the world stopped shaking, there was silence. Tomel opened his eyes slowly. His shoulder hurt, his head throbbed, but he was alive. The front of the shuttle had broken off. Thick black smoke curled into the air. Sparks still flashed from broken panels. He unbuckled himself and crawled out. The air was warm and heavy. The forest around him was deep green, full of strange trees with wide, silver leaves. Tall vines hung like curtains, and the sky was a soft orange color. Anyone? Is anyone there? He called out. No answer. Tomel checked the wreck. No other crew had survived. He found only burned gear and a few working items, a tent, a solar battery, dried food, a water filter, and a survival rifle with full charges. He was alone. Tomel knew the basics of survival. The training was boring back on the ship, but he had paid attention. First, shelter. He found a soft patch of ground near a small hill, far enough from the shuttle in case it exploded later. He set up the tent and gathered metal scraps to make a warning fence. Next, water. A slow stream ran nearby, glowing faintly blue in the dusk. He used the filter and filled 3 bottles. Then food. He had 20 dry meal packs, enough for 10 days if he ate slowly. By the time the twin moons rose above the trees, Tomel had a fire going with broken plastic and wood. He sat close, holding the rifle, watching the trees. Everything here was unfamiliar. Every sound made him jump. Suddenly, something howled in the distance. It was long, deep, and not human. Tomel didn't sleep that night. He sat with his back to the tent wall, the rifle across his lap. He thought of Earth, of the giant cities and clean air domes. He remembered his sister, always laughing at how serious he was. He remembered the stars as seen from orbit, but all of that was far away now. The forest around him stayed quiet, except for soft wind and the far-off howls. No footsteps, no voices, just the fire's crackle and the slow hum of insects. When morning came, he felt more tired than before, but he was alive. He kept working. On the second day, he explored the crash site more. A few panels from the shuttle still worked. He connected the solar battery and set up a weak distress signal. It might take weeks or months before anyone passed near this part of the galaxy, but he had to try. He also found something odd. Tracks. Not human, not boot-shaped. These were long, wide paw marks, too big for a normal animal. Each had 4 clawed toes, pressed deep into the wet earth near the stream. Whatever made them had passed by recently. Mel followed them for a few meters. Then he stopped. Something had watched the crash. Something had come close to his tent and walked away. He returned to camp quickly, checking everything. Nothing was taken. Nothing was broken. But the feeling stayed with him. He was not alone. That night, Tomel lit a smaller fire. He sat inside the tent just behind the open flap. The rifle was in his hands. Outside, the forest glowed faintly. Strange flowers blinked like stars. The wind carried soft whistles, like breathing. Then, he heard a branch snap. He aimed the rifle but stayed quiet. Shadows moved beyond the firelight. Something stepped forward. A figure. It stood on 2 legs. But it wasn't human. It was tall, covered in short, thick fur, with long ears and a tail that swayed slowly behind it. Its face was part human, part wolf. Long snout, sharp eyes, but calm. It wore something like a wrap made of plant fibers and bones. The figure didn't speak. It simply stared. Tomel didn't move. The creature took one slow step forward, then another. Its eyes never left his. Tomo felt fear, but also something else. The creature didn't look angry. It didn't growl. It looked tired. Very slowly, Tomo reached into a pack beside him and took out a fruit bar. He unwrapped it and placed it outside the tent flap. The creature tilted its head. It stepped closer, sniffed the air, and then crouched. With long, careful fingers, it took the bar and stepped back. It didn't eat it right away. It looked at Tomo again, then turned and disappeared into the trees. The forest returned to silence. Tomo sat still for a long time. His hands were shaking. The fire crackled softly beside him. He didn't sleep much that night either. But deep inside, something had changed. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with wonder. He was not alone, and whatever lived on this planet could think. The next morning, Tomo woke early. His body was tired, but his mind was alert. The memory of the wolf-like alien still filled his thoughts. It had not attacked him. It had not growled or shown its teeth. It had simply stood there, looked at him, and taken the fruit bar. Now, the question stayed with him. Why? He stepped outside the tent. The forest looked calm again, almost peaceful. Silver leaves moved softly in the breeze. The stream flowed nearby, glowing a little in the early light. Tomo looked at the ground round his camp. Yes, there they were again. Tracks. The same wide, four-toed paw marks, just like the night before. They circled the tent carefully, and one set stopped right where he had placed the fruit bar. It wasn't a dream. It had really happened. He followed the trail for a few meters again, but it disappeared quickly into thick undergrowth. These creatures, whatever. They knew the forest better than he did. That day, Tomo worked hard to strengthen his camp. He added more metal pieces to the small fence around the tent. He used shiny panels from the shuttle to reflect light, hoping the beacon signal would go further. He also tied some thread between trees so he would hear if anything walked through during the night. But even as he worked, he kept looking into the trees. Would the creature return? Was it watching him again? He didn't feel hunted. In fact, he felt something stranger, like someone was nearby, watching from a distance, but not with anger. With curiosity. As the sun lowered and the twin moons appeared again, Tomo boiled water for dinner. He ate slowly, always listening. His rifle was beside him, but he didn't hold it. He didn't want to scare the creature if it returned. And then, just like before, he heard a sound, soft footsteps, from the edge of the trees. The same figure appeared. The wolf-like alien stood tall, half covered in fur and fabric. Her arms were long, and her movements quiet and smooth. She looked just like before, wild, strong, and calm. This time, she stepped into the firelight. Tomo sat still. His heartbeat was fast, but he kept his hands open and low. The creature looked at the food pack beside him. Tomo slowly reached into his supplies and took out another fruit bar. He placed it on the ground, just as before. The alien woman walked forward, her eyes on him the whole time. She crouched down, picked up the bar, sniffed it again, then unwrapped it using her claws. She understood the wrapper. That surprised Tomo more than anything. She sniffed it once more, then took a small bite, and this time she stayed. The wolf woman sat across from him, just beside the fire. She ate slowly, her eyes always moving, watching the fire, the tent, and him. Her ears turned with every forest sound, alert and sharp. Tomo looked at her face. Her eyes were large, golden, and full of thought. Her fur was thick around the shoulders, but her hands were long and clever. He didn't say anything. He just nodded once. She blinked. Then, without warning, she stood and walked toward the tent. Tomo stood too. Wait, he said quickly, raising a hand. She didn't stop. She bent down, pushed the flap of the tent open, and stepped inside. Tomo hesitated. He didn't want to make her angry. He followed carefully, peeking inside. She had curled up on one side of the tent, her arms round her knees, tail wrapped close. Her eyes were closed. She looked calm, peaceful, like she had come a long way just to rest. Tomo stared for a moment, confused, unsure what to do. Then, slowly, he stepped inside and sat on the other side. He didn't sleep at first. His mind raced with thoughts. Why? Did she come here? Why him? Was she hiding from something? Did she see him as safe? The alien woman didn't move again. She simply lay still, breathing softly. And soon, without meaning to, Tomo fell asleep. Morning light woke him. At first, he thought it was a dream, but when he opened his eyes, the space beside him was empty, but the ground still showed where she had rested. Her scent, earthy and warm, still lingered in the air. He stepped outside the tent. The forest was quiet again, but something had changed. Beside the fire, she had left something. It was a small bundle made of soft bark and leaves. Inside, Tomo found 4 round fruits and a piece of dried meat, clearly from a local animal. It was a gift. That day, Tomo smiled more than usual. He didn't know her name. He didn't know where she came from, but something had passed between them, a silent agreement, a moment of trust. She wasn't a wild beast. She was someone, and she had chosen to sleep beside him. That evening, Tomo placed another fruit bar near the tent entrance. He also set aside a clean blanket, just in case she came again. He sat by the fire, waiting. The sun dipped low. Shadows stretched across the forest. And then, softly, from the trees, she returned. She walked closer without fear now. She saw the food, saw the blanket, and looked at Tomo. This time, she made a sound, a low, soft hum. It wasn't a word, but it wasn't an animal noise either. It was something more personal. Tomo smiled. She stepped into the tent again and curled up the same way. And Tomo knew, deep down, that he was no longer truly alone on this world. Tomo woke up to the sound of soft breathing. The tent was warm, the early sunlight slipping through the thin fabric walls. He turned his head slowly. The wolf-like alien woman was still there, curled beside him, fast asleep. Her arms were round her legs, her tail curled tight, and her breathing calm and even. Tomo didn't move. He watched her quietly for a moment. Her fur caught the sunlight, glowing gently. She looked peaceful, not dangerous. Even now, so close, she didn't seem like a threat. In fact, she seemed tired, as if she had been running for a long time. Before she found him, after a while, she stirred. Her golden eyes blinked open, and she looked at Tomo. There was no fear in her face, no surprise. It was almost like she expected him to be there, like this was already normal to her. Tomo gave her a small nod. Morning, he said softly. Of course, she didn't answer, but she tilted her head, then stood up slowly. She stretched her arms and legs like a cat, then stepped outside the tent. Tomo followed her. Outside, the forest was calm. The twin moons were fading as the sun rose higher. Birds with strange feathers flew overhead, and insects buzzed quietly around the glowing plants. The woman walked to the stream. She crouched and scooped water with her hands, drinking it slowly. Tomo stood a few steps back, watching. After a moment, she looked at him and made a short gesture with her hand. Then she pointed to the stream. Tomo understood. She was telling him the water was safe. He smiled and nodded. That day, she didn't leave like before. Instead, she stayed near the camp. She didn't speak, but she watched everything he did. When Tomo started cleaning a solar panel, she crouched beside him, curious. When he boiled water for breakfast, she sniffed the air and tilted her head as if trying to understand. Tomo decided to show her. He handed her a spoon. She looked at it for a moment, then carefully copied the way he ate. Her movements were slow, thoughtful. She chewed the dried food like it was something new to her, but she didn't complain. After they ate, she stood and walked a few steps into the trees. Then she looked back at him and made a soft sound, almost like a short hum. Tomo took it as a sign to follow. She led him deeper into the forest. The path was rough, full of roots and vines, but she moved with ease, light on her feet. Tomo followed carefully, rifle slung on his back just in case. They didn't go far, only 10 or 15 minutes from the camp, but what she showed him surprised him. It was a river, a wide, slow-moving one, with clear water and silver blue. Fish swimming just beneath the surface. On the far bank were trees full of hanging fruit round, soft and golden in color. The woman walked to the edge, took off the small wrap she wore, and stepped into the water. Her movements were quick. With one smooth dive, she disappeared under the surface. Tomo stepped back, unsure. Then she came up again, holding a large fish in her hands. She tossed it on the grass and gave him a proud look. Tomo laughed for the first time in days. He helped her build a small fire near the river, and they cooked the fish together. It tasted strange, sweet, and soft but good. She seemed pleased that he liked it. Later, she showed him which fruits were safe to eat. She pointed to the golden ones, then to some others, and shook her head. Tomo followed her lead. It was clear. Now, she knew this land very well. As the sun began to lower, they returned to the camp together. The day had passed without fear, without confusion. They didn't need to speak. They used gestures, nods, and small sounds, and it worked. Back at the camp, Tomo opened a small notebook and drew a picture of a fish. Then he pointed at it and looked at her. She looked at the drawing, then touched it gently. She made a sound soft and almost like a word. Ruh. Tomo pointed again. Fish, he said. She looked at him. Fish, he smiled. Close. She tapped the drawing again. Ruh. Tomo nodded. Okay, ruh. They both smiled. That night, she entered the tent without hesitation. She curled up beside him again. This time a little closer. Tomo didn't mind. It felt normal now, safe, even. Before sleeping, he thought about everything. This planet, Vesa, had been unknown. It was supposed to be empty. The ship's skin had not picked up any intelligent life. But now he knew better. There were people here. They might look different, but they could think, learn, share. They had kindness. And one of them had chosen to stay with him. As he closed his eyes, he felt her tail brush against his leg. She didn't speak, but the silence between them was no longer strange. It was full of understanding. The morning light crept through the tent fabric, soft and warm. Tomo awoke slowly, careful not to disturb Ray, the wolf-like alien woman who was still curled up beside him. The calm silence between them felt less strange now. Tomo had learned that sometimes words were not needed. He stepped outside the tent and breathed the fresh air. The forest was alive with sounds, the chirping of small birds, the rustling of leaves, and the distant call of an unknown animal. Ray sat near the fire, her eyes watching him quietly. Tomo smiled and waved his hand. She blinked and returned the gesture. Over time, they had developed a simple way to communicate without words. Small signs, nods, and shared actions became their language. That day, Tomo decided to explore more. He wanted to learn about this strange new world and about Ray's people. He packed some food, water, and the survival rifle, just in case. Ray stood beside him at the camp edge, watching. When Tomo lifted his hand to say he was leaving, she stepped forward and gently touched his arm. Her touch was warm, steady. It told him to be careful. Tomo nodded and stepped into the forest. The trees grew tall and thick here. Their trunks were wide and covered with silver moss. Strange flowers glowed faintly in the shadows, and vines hung like curtains. The forest floor was soft with fallen leaves and strange seeds. As Tomo walked, he tried to remember the tracks he had seen before. He was hoping to find signs of Ray's tribe. The paw prints had been large, with 4 sharp claws. He looked carefully at the ground. Suddenly, he spotted something, a small pile of bones wrapped in leaves. It looked like a message, or a mark left by someone. Tomo sat down and studied the pile. Then, from the trees, a soft sound came, a low, gentle humming. He looked up and saw Ray, standing quietly a few meters away. She motioned for him to follow. Ray led him through a narrow path between the trees. The sunlight grew dimmer as the canopy thickened overhead. Birds flew quickly above, and distant sounds of water reached their ears. After a short walk, they came to a small clearing. In the center stood a simple shelter made from woven branches and large leaves. It was low to the ground and shaped like a dome. Round it, small fires burned, and the smell of cooking meat filled the air. Tomo's heart beat faster. He was not alone. Ray's tribe was near. Ray moved forward slowly. The other figures in the clearing, tall, furred, and wolf-like turned. To watch, their eyes glowed softly in the fire. One of them, larger than the rest, stepped forward. He had thick gray fur and wore a necklace made of carved bones. His eyes studied Tomel carefully. Ray made a sound, a low growl mixed with a soft hum. The tribe leader nodded once, and then motioned for Tomel to come closer. Tomel took a deep breath and stepped into the light. The tribe surrounded him. Curious, but not hostile, Tomel held up his hands, showing he meant no harm. He pointed to himself. Tomel, he said clearly. The tribe leader watched and then pointed to himself. Kale, he said. His voice low but steady. Tomel smiled. Kale. The wolf-like woman beside Kale, smaller and with silver fur, stepped forward and gave a small nod. Tomel guessed she was Ray's sister or friend. Tomel reached into his pack and took out a small device, the shuttle's data pad. He showed them pictures of Earth, tall buildings, blue oceans, green forests, and wide skies. The tribe watched the images with wonder. Kale's eyes grew wide as he saw the pictures of humans. He made a sound that was almost a laugh. Tomel smiled back. For the first time, he felt something true hope. Over the next few hours, Tomel and the tribe tried to learn from each other. They pointed to things, made simple sounds, and helped one another understand. Ray stayed close to Tomel, watching and learning. Tomel saw how the tribe lived. They hunted in groups, used sharp stones and wooden spears, and gathered fruits from the forest. Their knowledge of the land was deep. When the sun began to set, Tomel sat near the fire with Ray and Kale. They shared roasted meat and strange fruits. Though they did not speak the same language, the warmth of the fire and the kindness in their eyes built a bridge. That night, back at his tent, Tomel thought about everything he had seen. This tribe, this people was different from anything he had expected. They were wild, yes, but also smart and kind. They had survived on this planet for many years, learning its secrets, and now they were trusting him. He looked beside him. Ray was already inside the tent, waiting. When he lay down, she moved close and rested her head on his shoulder. Tomel smiled and closed his eyes. For the first time since the crash, he felt like he was part of something bigger. Not just a lone survivor, but a visitor in a new world. The next morning, the sky was painted in soft pink and orange. Tomel woke slowly, feeling the gentle warmth of Ray's fur against his arm. Outside, the forest was waking up, birds singing, leaves moving in a soft breeze. Tomel stretched and looked around the small camp he had built. But today, he was not alone. Ray sat near the fire, her eyes watching him quietly. He smiled. He had decided to stay with Ray's tribe for a while. He needed their help to understand this strange new world, and he wanted to show them he meant no harm. At the edge of the clearing, Kale stood waiting. His eyes were sharp but calm. Tomel approached him carefully. Kale spoke a few words in his strange language. Ray looked at Tomel and made a soft hum. Tomel guessed it was an invitation. Kale led him toward a small path that wound deeper into the forest. This is the trial, Kale said. His voice low but clear. Tomel's heart beat faster. He didn't know what the trial was, but he trusted Kale and Ray. The path led to a large rocky area, covered with moss and small plants. At the center was a deep hole in the ground. The hole looked dark and cold. Kale pointed to the hole. Then he pointed to Tomel and made a questioning sound. Tomel looked down. The hole was deep, and the bottom was not visible. Kale nodded once. Test of courage, he said simply. Tomel took a deep breath. He knew this was important. This was how the tribe would decide if he could be trusted. He looked at Ray. Her eyes were steady. She made a small, encouraging sound. Tomel tied a rope around his waist. Kale and two other tribe members held the rope tightly. Slowly, Tomel climbed down into the hole. The walls were rough and damp. The air was cooler, and the only sound was his breathing and the soft scrape of his hands on the rock. As he reached the bottom, Tomel saw something shining faintly. He stepped closer. There, in the darkness, lay a small crystal glowing with a soft blue light. Tomel reached out carefully and picked it up. Suddenly, the ground shook. Dust fell from above. Tomel looked up. The hole was deep, but the rope held steady. He started to climb up slowly, feeling the weight of the glowing crystal in his hand. When he reached the top, Kale and the others pulled him out carefully. Tomel showed the crystal to them. Kale nodded with respect. "You passed," Kale said simply. Ray stepped forward and touched Tomel's arm. She made a soft hum, full of approval. Tomel smiled, feeling pride and relief. The rest of the day was filled with lessons. Kale showed Tomel how to use the spears properly. He taught him how to listen to the forest and understand the sounds of animals. Ray stayed close, watching Tomel carefully, sometimes helping him with a gentle touch or a guiding look. Tomel was learning more about their ways, and they were learning about him. That evening, the tribe gathered around the fire. Kale stood and spoke slowly. Tomel could not understand the words, but the tone was serious and respectful. Then, Kale looked at Tomel and made a gesture. "You are one of us now." The tribe members nodded, and some made soft sounds of welcome. Tomel felt a wave of warmth. After so many days alone, he finally had a place to belong. Later that night, in his tent, Tomel looked at the glowing crystal on his small table. It was a symbol of trust, a gift from the tribe. He looked beside him. Ray was sleeping peacefully. Tomel whispered, "Thank you." The silence answered back. The morning sun filtered softly through the trees, casting golden patches on the forest floor. Tomel woke with a deep sense of belonging. For the first time, he felt part of something larger than himself, a community that accepted him, even though he was different. Ray lay beside him, her breathing calm. Outside the tent, the tribe was already moving. The sounds of footsteps, quiet conversations, and the crackle of small fires filled the air. Tomel stretched and stepped out. Kale was there, sharpening a spear, his eyes meeting Tomel's with a calm greeting. "Today, you will learn the forest better," Kale said with a nod, his voice steady but kind. Tomel smiled. He was ready. Ray followed closely as they walked through the trees. The forest seemed different now, less strange, more alive. Every sound, every rustle, felt like part of a larger story. They came to a small clearing where the tribe often gathered. Kale motioned for Tomel to wait. Then, he raised his hand to the sky and made a slow, deep sound like a call from the treetops. Several wolf-like figures appeared, moving swiftly and silently. They circled the clearing, their eyes bright and alert. Kale explained, using gestures, that these were scouts, watchers who protected the tribe by looking far and wide for danger. One of the scouts approached Tomel and stopped. Its golden eyes studied him closely. Tomel held out his hand slowly. The scout sniffed it and then gave a low hum of approval. For the next few hours, Tomel and Ray joined the scouts on their patrol. They moved quickly through the thick trees, stepping over roots and ducking under branches. Tomel learned to watch for signs, broken twigs, footprints, changes in the wind. Ray was silent but attentive. Occasionally, she made soft sounds, pointing to things Tomel might miss. As they walked, the wind shifted. A cold breeze swept through the trees. Ray's ears twitched sharply. She stopped and growled low, soft, but full of warning. Tomel looked where she was staring. In the distance, smoke rose above the trees. The scouts moved quickly, their pace growing urgent. Tomel ran to keep up. As they neared the smoke, the forest opened to a clearing where the remains of a small fire smoldered. Nearby, broken branches and footprints showed signs of recent movement. Kale examined the area carefully. His eyes darkened. He made a warning sound and looked at Tomel and Ray. The tribe was not safe. That night, the tribe gathered around the fire. The mood was serious. Kale spoke in low tones, explaining that another group of creatures, wild, dangerous, and not friendly, was near. They were hunters who moved like shadows and wanted to claim the forest for themselves. Tomel felt a chill. He realized that his new home was at risk. Ray sat close to him, her eyes shining with fierce determination. Over the next days, the tribe prepared. They built stronger shelters, sharpened their weapons, and learned new ways to move silently. Tomel trained hard with Kale and the scouts. He learned to track, to hide, and to understand the forest's secrets. Ray stayed by his side, sometimes guiding him, sometimes watching quietly. Tomel admired her strength and grace. She was more than a wild creature, she was a protector. Friend, one evening, as the sun set behind the trees, Tomel and Ray sat by the fire. Tomel looked at her and spoke softly. "Thank you for trusting me." She looked at him with her golden eyes and made a soft hum. Tomel smiled. He knew this was just the beginning. The forest was full of dangers, but also full of hope. Together, Tomel, Ray, and the tribe would face whatever came next. The air was still. The forest, usually filled with the sounds of life, now felt silent and tense. Even the birds were quiet. Tomel stood beside Ray, watching the trees sway gently in the wind. They had trained every day since the warning. The tribe was ready. But something deep inside Tomel still felt nervous. These hunters, the ones Kale had spoken of, were dangerous. They were not like Ray's people. They did not protect nature. They only took what they wanted. That morning, Kale gathered everyone in the main clearing. The whole tribe was there. Some held spears. Others carried tools made from stone and bone. Their eyes were calm but focused. Kale pointed to the sky, then to the east, smoke again. But this time, it was closer. "We must protect our home," he said in his deep voice. "Together." Tomel nodded. Ray let out a quiet sound, something between a growl and a song. It filled him with courage. He wasn't a soldier. He had never fought in a real battle before. But this was different. This was not about fighting for power or control. This was about protecting what mattered. The scouts moved first, running ahead to check the forest. Tomel, Ray, and Kale followed behind, stepping carefully through the underbrush. After an hour of walking, they heard a loud crack, like a tree falling. The hunters were near. Kale raised his hand, signaling everyone to stop. Tomel crouched behind a fallen log and peeked through the branches. There they were, figures covered in dark armor, faces hidden by sharp masks. They moved like shadows, cutting through trees with long blades, scaring the forest animals as they came. Tomel felt anger rise in his chest. These people didn't belong here. They didn't respect the land. Kale looked at Ray, then at Tomel. "It's time," he said. The tribe moved like the wind, fast, quiet, and smart. They didn't rush in with noise. They surrounded the hunters, using the trees as shields. Tomel followed Ray. She moved with grace, jumping from root to root. When they got close enough, Kale let out a loud cry signal. Then the forest exploded. With motion, spears flew through the air. Warriors leaped from the shadows. The hunters shouted. Surprised, Tomel aimed his old rifle, took a deep breath, and fired a warning shot near the ground. It didn't hurt anyone, but it caught the hunters' attention. They turned to face him, but Ray was faster. She jumped forward, using her strength and speed to knock a hunter down. Tomel ran beside her, dodging and moving behind trees. One hunter came at him with a blade, but Tomel ducked and pushed him back with the butt of his rifle. Ray covered his side, growling fiercely. The tribe worked together like one body, each person playing a part. Even the scouts in the trees dropped nets made from vines, trapping to hunters who tried to run. Kale fought bravely, using his spear with great skill. His movements were sharp but calm, like a dancer in battle. The hunters were strong, but they had not expected the forest itself to rise against them. After a long struggle, the last hunter dropped his blade and held up his hands. Kale raised his hand, signaling the tribe to stop. There was silence again, deep and wide. The forest had been defended. The hunters, now surrounded, were taken to the edge of the forest and warned. Kale spoke clearly. "This land is protected. We will not allow harm. Leave and do not return." The hunters left, walking back into the open plains. They did not look back. That night, the tribe gathered once more around the fire. There was no celebration, only quiet pride and shared peace. Tomel sat beside Ray. He looked at the stars above, shining through the treetops. Kale walked over and placed a carved stone in Tomel's hand. It was shaped like a leaf. "You are one of us," he said. Tomel's chest felt full. He nodded, holding the stone tightly. Ray leaned against him, her golden eyes soft. In the days that followed, life returned to normal. The birds sang again. The trees stood tall. The tribe worked, laughed, and live with the forest as they always had. Tomo helped build a new shelter near the others. He planted small roots with Ray beside him. Learning to grow things from the land, he was not just a visitor anymore. He was home. One evening, while walking along the river, Tomo found a flat stone and began to carve. He wrote a few simple words. I came here alone, but I stayed because of them. Ray watched him, her ears twitching in the breeze. He smiled at her. Together, they walked back to the camp, step by step, side by side.